Hey everybody, thanks so much for rejoining us for the Q&A after Tantalus Behind the Mask. We have gathered some of your questions and we've gathered some of the awesome people who helped make that production happen. And we're going to just jump in. So today with us we have Mr. Robert Petkoff, who played Achilles and is coming to us from his apartment in New York. And we have Mr. Stephen Cole Hughes, who is in the ensemble and explained to us in the documentary what a myrmidon was. And he is coming to us from Gunnison, Colorado, which is -5 degrees today. And then we have Mr. Kevin Copenhaver, who is our costume crafts director here at the Denver Center. And he is coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee, whereas he is helping build dinosaurs, and maybe he'll tell us what I'm talking about. And then we have Lisa and Bob Orzalek, who are coming to us from Lakewood, I believe. Is that right?
Oh, Denver.
Denver-ish. I want to start with you, Robert. What's one thing that somebody who saw the production would have no idea happened backstage or during the process?
Oh, wow. I mean, the first thing that jumps to mind is that I used to always go to McDonald's and get a McFlurry during the 9th play, I think it was. Each of the principal actors had 2 plays that they weren't in. And so we would have an hour each time, and I'd clean off, get dressed. Actually, I don't even think stage management knew this. And I would sneak out of the building, sometimes with Mia Yu, because I think we had the same play off, and we would both go to McDonald's, get a McFlurry to refresh ourselves, and come back for the final show, get back into costume for the final play and for the final curtain call.
Oh my God, that is so amazing.
Just actors will do anything.
I know. But it gives you a sense of how long the whole journey was.
I love that.
So Lisa and Bob, I'm going to throw the same question to you two.
I think that people probably didn't realize, as much work that we put in beforehand. Like, we started working on this show like so many more months before a normal production.
Just how long it took. And what about you, Bob?
I think that you see it a little bit in the video that there is some shenanigans and carrying on backstage. And I think Robert Petkoff could speak to this a little, or Stephen Cole, but there's a lot of tension in this, and there had to be some sort of release. So there was a little carrying on and some camaraderie between the crew and the actors that made this possible to do as long as it took, especially those marathon days.
That's amazing. And let's go to Mr. Copenhaver. Same question.
Something that went on behind the scenes that the audience
or during the process that we would not be aware of.
Well, it did become aware. The audience would become aware of in the documentary that my hair color changed throughout the process.
I did notice that.
Yeah, I didn't start out with gray hair like I had now. It was still dark at the time. But as the process wore on, and as we started working longer and longer hours around the clock, we'd get to that point in the evening where you get punchy and need to have some sort of a break. And so I bleached my hair, and over the process of a month or so, just started adding color to my hair that indicated my emotional state at the time. So I went from sort of blonde to orange to red to, my goal was to get my head on fire, to look like my hair was on fire. And I think I did achieve that eventually. Yeah, and a little tidbit behind the scenes, I suppose.
I love it. Mr. Hughes.
Well, I think the reason I'm here today is to tell some scandalous stories about what went on during Tantalus.
Absolutely.
So we can edit these out or not. I have my I have my Tantalus diary
Oh
Wow.
my gosh.
that I kept.
Wow.
Wow.
Nice.
This is day one, right there. I'll get to day one later. But something that people wouldn't know is the play was masked, right? And it was 10 hours long. And so somewhere along I can't remember when this was. I can't remember what evening it was. And I don't even know, Robert, if you know this or not.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm going to say.
Pierre?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
We had an evening where, so I was in the ensemble. I was a graduate student at the Denver Center at the time. And some of my classmates and I were all in the show as kind of the ensemble. So there was one night where one of my classmates got one of the principal actors to swap costumes and masks. And my classmate, Pierre, went on for Alyssa as Robert, who was what was the snake?
I can't remember the name, but it was you saw it in the documentary where she comes out in the costume where the two snakes and she's all green and she has the mask with the big red eyes. But because we're in masks and because no one can tell who we are, and because there was no speaking in that role, it was just hissing and making the snake sounds, they switched.
Pierre went on, my male classmate went on for, they were roughly the same body type. We approached her.
Don't say that about Lisa.
She was all for it, and he went on as her. Nobody knew, and then she came on stage with us as a Myrmidon and had the mask and had the shield and the sword, and I had to nudge her where to stand, and then we had to pull her off where she didn't know where to go. It was so fun.
Oh my God! How far into the run would that have happened, Stephen?
It was pretty far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I heard in the documentary they talked about we'll stay with Stephen for a moment, that you rehearsed for 6 months, right? And normally at the Denver Center, a straight play we'll rehearse 4 weeks in the room, have a week of tech, and then we'll start previews. For a musical, it's 5 weeks. So that just gives the audience, I should be looking up here, that just gives the audience a sense of how protracted this process was. So Bob alluded to tension. There was some tension in the process. And I've heard glimmers. Stephen, give us just one example of how that tension manifested.
Oh boy, Robert, where do I even?
Yeah, really.
Well, it was, as you say, it was a long rehearsal process, and the process began. Well, I'll just say this right now. We can edit this out or not, but the very first thing that Peter Hall said to the entire room of assembled people on day one of rehearsal was, "We're in a right royal up." That's the first thing he said to us. And what he was referring to was that a couple of the other directors and I think some of the other staff all had visa problems, so they had to turn around and go back. That's a minor thing. I think what Bob was alluding to, and what we can all talk about to some degree, is over the course of our very long rehearsal process, there were some people who were fired and there were some people who quit.
Oh,
yeah. You wouldn't know that from the documentary.
You would not know that from the documentary.
I mean, they talked about the one director who didn't come back. That was a dramatic part of the documentary.
Yeah.
So Bob, let's go to Bob and Lisa again. You in the documentary, it looks like the set is being designed on the spot. It looks like it's happening during the rehearsal process. Is that correct?
There was some overall idea of what the set was going to be and needed to be, but how it was going to be used, and certain parts were not really known how it was going to be used, if it would support the story, what the story was going to be, if that there was so much in that we just didn't know early.
Well, in the early part of the rehearsal process, what the scene shop and a lot of the production team was working on was not the set, but the museum piece that was in the source theater. We had to completely disassemble the source theater, the space theater, I'm sorry, and put in the museum, which in itself was more than 2 or 3 of our stage theater productions.
Oh, wow.
That took place in March, April, and May. And then in June and July, we actually built the show that went into the Rickerson Theater because we did not have any information about elements that we could work on at that point. So we were into July, and we did not have set information. So we built and installed the theater, the piece that went into the Rickerson for the Christmas slot, and played against the time as panelists. And then we got into, well, after rehearsals had been going for a few months, and actually they cut the plays at 5 hours out of the show. Then we built.
And Bob, just to give audience some perspective, in a normal production calendar, how far in advance do you have designs for a show, like in our current life?
Oh, I would say before opening
or before first rehearsal.
Oh, before first rehearsal. Designs typically are completed about 4 or 5 weeks. Get us 4 or 5 weeks before rehearsal.
Okay, just to give you a sense of, and Bob, you mentioned tension. You mentioned that there is some tension. How did it play out for those of you who were trying to build the thing?
Well, I think the fact that I was featured a couple of times in the video speaks to it. Nobody wanted to speak on camera. There were very few people. Kevin Copehaver had to, but there were very few people who wanted their emotions and their thoughts captured on camera. And Dirk Olson, the director, would come around and he would say, please say something. And so I did, but it was a fabulous experience. We were supported early on in the process like never before. You saw our house foreman, Chris Kendall, driving a forklift. It was a brand new forklift. We spent a lot of money. We saw in the video our pickup truck that was bringing in scenery one night, and that was a brand new truck. You know, in 2000, it was purchased in 1999. It was $30,000 for that truck, and we never had a truck that was more than about $5,000 at that point. So we were really well supported, and fortunately, we had the theater or the museum piece in the space theater to build.
To work on.
That kept us really busy and involved. But as the tension between directors and the playwright grew, we were on the same floor as everybody else. So we heard it, we felt it, we knew a little about what was going on, and understood that there was some difficulties that were beyond our.
Yeah. And let's go to Robert. So Robert, how did that affect you? How did the tension between, we got a glimpse of that in the documentary. You know, the play was coming together late. There were a lot of, Peter Hall was requesting a lot of edits. Maybe John Barton wasn't so eager to follow his guidance. And it sounds like there was a ton of cuts that happened. How did that affect you and the other members of the acting company?
Well, whenever you're in any new play process, you always expect some playwriting changes. This is times 10 because there were 10 plays. And I think Peter started the whole process by saying, look, we already recognize that some of the plays just aren't in any shape to be performed, and we need to do some major work on them, in his opinion. And I don't think he was wrong. I think that Colin Teven did some really terrific work. trying to shape and hone the stuff. But because it was such a long process, it wasn't like, okay, so 2 weeks later we had a play. It was months and months of that. And even I think you see it in the documentary that even going into the final, I think the final month before we started performing, we were still trying to nail down certain plays and the writing in certain things. And, as happens in any project, I think actors you start a play and you don't know anything. And as time goes on, you start to own it more and more. And so for some of us in the company, I know I was one, and I think you hear it a little bit in the documentary, that after a while you start to understand the play, maybe as well as the directors, or you're trying to look at your role, but you also start to see the larger picture. And so you start to have very strong opinions about material, especially when they wanted to cut things that we felt had been working. And I think that was one of the pushbacks you saw on camera, was that there were some chunks of text and moments that they wanted to change, that some of us felt they wanted to change because they had been watching it in rehearsal for 5 months.
Oh.
And they were a little like, I don't think we need that anymore. I'm like, no. You don't need it anymore, but the audience needs it because they've never seen it before. This part tells the story really well. This tells this. I remember advocating so strongly that my first appearance as Achilles is up through the sand, and I run around and have this huge argument with my mother, played by Elisa Thetis, and that was one of the first scenes we sort of nailed down in rehearsal, and it was fun, it was funny, and it had a very important thing it told about the story, to set Achilles' story on the trail. And I remember about 4 months in, that was one of those that we would run it and it would be fine and we would move on to something else. And about 4 months in, they were like, I think we just need to cut this. I think it's not as that. And both Elisa and I were like, whoa. You're bored with it. It's worked and you're bored with it. Just stop. Leave this alone. Stop putting spice into the stew. You just don't, this part doesn't need it. There's so many other things you can look at. And so that tension would happen, actor to director, the two creators, colleagues saying, I think this works, I think this doesn't work. And then of course the tension of, what do I do here? We don't even have this play finished, and how do I do that? I think also some of the tension came from the hardest working people on stage in Tantalus, which was that chorus of women. Like I mentioned before, all the principal actors had 2 plays off each. The women didn't.
Oh.
The women in the ensemble were on stage from the beginning to the end,
my God.
with very little exception. I mean, occasionally they would back the periphery. You would have them go off to make changes, but for the most part, they were there. What that meant then was that every single rehearsal, they were there. And so long days. Peter had settled up early on that he didn't want to work on the weekends, so we agreed with Equity to work 9-hour days, Monday through Friday, so that we could have weekends off, which was great. For some principal actors, if they were working on a play I wasn't in on a Friday, I could get on a plane on Thursday night, fly home to New York and see my wife, come back on Monday morning. That could never happen for the women in the ensemble because they were called to every rehearsal, and that takes a huge toll. And as much as dialogue changed, the action of the women in the ensemble changed radically, constantly.
Oh man!
And with every director, that's something I think Mick might have mentioned in the play. One director walks in and says, "I want it this way." The next director comes in and says, "No, don't do that. Do something else." And so the women in the ensemble, I think, were the ones that suffered under that the most. And I think that created tension among some of the women in the ensemble, among the entire cast in general. That kind of working someone so hard like that can get to you after a while. And
sure.
And it creates a frisson of tension.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Can I add to something?
Yeah, please, Stephen.
I think the other big piece in terms of what the end product was like beautiful and the play was amazing. So, but something else that added to the tension, which was enormous, I think, was that John Barton originally wrote the play as a correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, but he wrote it as like a realistic play, a realistic telling of the Greek myths. Peter wanted to change that into a classic masked Greek play. So John wrote the play not intending for it to be in mask.
Oh, wow.
And so some of the original actors who were with us at the beginning were more naturalistic actors. And then as Peter decided that he wanted it to be a mask play, he fired those people, and then he recast them with people who he knew were mask experts. I feel like I can tell these stories now because some of these people are with us. So
yeah, I mean that was a
That's
colossal event for the actors.
How far into the rehearsal was that?
I'd say about 2 to 3 months in.
Oh.
And so we had been rehearsing. We were just playing. We were playing like actors do. And John, I think from day one, John said, "Now this is not a play to be done in masks. This is. I want to break that tradition. I want to break that cycle. I wrote a play that was a very modern retelling of these things, and so we leapt into that with all our hearts. And when Peter started coming around to the idea of masks, started to introduce the idea of masks to us, it was with the caveat that maybe in some of the plays, in some sections, we would do mask work as a stylistic sort of addition to what we were doing, which we were like, oh, okay, let's try that. When the call came to wear the masks, there were a lot of us who were very upset. And, and like Stephen mentioned, there was one actor in particular who quit because of that. He said, I'm not going to, this is not why I came to Denver to do this play. This is not what I want. And he was a close friend of John Barton's and felt that John was being betrayed. So he left the production. I mean, on the plus side, as much as we had bonded with the actor playing Agamemnon and other roles, very much so, loved the guy. And when he was fired and one of the women on the ensemble was let go as well, that was a huge betrayal. We had bonded, we were all in this together, and then you're told, well, you're actually not all in this together. We want to cull some people. Well, that, first of all, it makes everyone insecure. They're like, oh, who am I next? What's going to happen? And you hate to see the people that you love and really enjoy go. The only plus that came from that was that out of losing someone we really admired and loved, we gained someone else that we admired and loved, and Greg Hicks, who came in and was tremendous. You saw him plenty in the documentary as Agamemnon, and he had the vocal technique and the mask work in his past, and he ended up being sort of a major coach for many of us on how to work in the mask. So just like everything else with Tantalus, we used to say this all the time. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And after doing Tantalus, we finally understood what that meant when Dickens says that in his book.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So Kevin, I'm going to come to you then, because you were building these masks. So at the beginning of the process, were the masks, from your point of view, they weren't in the mix?
They were in the mix, but in a very different way. And sorry, somebody turned the lights out, and I don't know how to turn them on. So I apologize for that. I'm in a space that
we can still see your essence.
Okay.
Kevin.
Okay. In the beginning, we had heard that there would potentially be masks, and I was very excited about that because I love masks. I love mask work. I love the whole tradition of masks. It's been sort of a forefront of my career for a very long time. Learning mask work and all of that kind of thing. So I was very excited. And for a while, we thought that we were going to make giant, oversized, sort of almost bread and puppet theater style masks that were going to be part of this sort of pageant that might open this experience. So actually I spent quite a bit of time kind of researching that and coming up with ideas and whatnot. And, it was always kind of on the back burner. Like, are we going to do this? Or are we not going to do this? And finally, after I can't remember how much time had passed, that got scrapped entirely. And then it was, we're going to go to full face masks. And I remember, that certainly being an issue because I had an issue with it because I know that you can't just throw a mask on and expect an actor to act behind that. You know, it's an entirely different technique to work in mask. It's super physical. It's just an entirely different approach, and I many times felt like I had to be the messenger of bearing bad news to an actor that we were going to be in full mask. And then at times, Dionysus Fotopoulos, who had designed the costumes and set, he would be in Denver for a little while, and then he'd just disappear, and we wouldn't know when he was coming back or not. And on one of those occasions that he left and never came back, I was asked if I would step in and start sort of designing the masks, and Sir Peter and some of the other fellows thought, well, let's try a half mask instead of a full mask. So the actor's mouth was free to move and whatnot. So I started working on half masks. And I put a fair amount of time in on that. And then, of course, Dionysus just happens to show up one day. And literally, he would, unannounced, would just walk in. No one knew he was coming or going. And he threw a tantrum, had a fit, and just literally picked up like stacks of sort of renderings that I had done and just threw them. It's like, that's preposterous. So then, again, I feel like empowered to talk about this now. He and Dionysus and Sir Peter, of course, came to sort of blows about that, and one thing led to another. But we ended up doing full masks on everybody, and we went through I don't know how many iterations of those masks, because we had to have rehearsal pieces for the actors to work in, and then of course the final finished masks. And I don't know that we actually finished the masks that were on stage once we opened the production until maybe the day the show opened.
Oh my gosh.
And we had to go through figuring out how to mic the actors. Sometimes there would be a mic in an actor's, pressing against their brow bone. Sometimes they would be coming out the nose of the masks. They were in various different places, depending on the sound requirements of the scene. And someone mentioned the word tension earlier. There was a lot of tension, and I do think that that's what led to me feeling like my head was on fire, and that's dyeing the hair situation. But I do have to say, Robert had mentioned, sort of bonding and that feeling of camaraderie that came out through this process, and I really felt that. Working with masks and casting an actor's face and having those kinds of fittings it's a very intimate experience.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't go back and trade that for anything.
I mean, the full head cast, I remember so much, which I loved. When we watched the documentary the other night, my wife said, "Oh my God, that's so claustrophobic." And I thought, no, it's actually really soothing, because you had two straws in your nose. I felt I could breathe, but it was about a half an hour of just pure relaxation. It was like a really great mud mask,
Wow.
Yeah,
others really suffered with that.
You can look at it. I try to create an environment where it was very calm and peaceful. And I'd put music on and try to make it a spa experience while your entire head is covered in
That's right.
in alginate and plaster bandages. And some people, like Robert, took to it very well. Others did not.
Wow.
It's you can't prepare an actor for that experience entirely. You just have to talk them through it. And I mean, again, like I said, it was a very intimate process.
Yeah.
And
and speaking of masks,
oh no, do you have one?
I happen to have
wow.
a souvenir. My first Achilles mask that came up, and as Kevin mentioned, oh wait, I don't know if you can see that way. My mic hole is right there.
Oh wow!
Between the eyes,
right
between the center of the brow.
So you'd have the microphone back here, and the cord would go up over your head, in. But it's great because it's got this texture. He was coming from the earth, and we sort of thought of those woad warriors, the Scottish that you see with the blue, which was really great. And the thing I remember so much too about this particular role was that the first costume I had was this buckskin top and pair of buckskin pants because they wanted this sort of earthy, woodsy feel. And I came out and did one rehearsal in that. And Dionysus and Peter immediately felt like, oh, it's too much like a Daniel Boone or like a Native American. So I came in. They said we're gonna figure something out for that. And I came in the next day, and they said, oh, your new costume is in your dressing room. And I walked in my dressing room, and my mask was there, and a thong. And I was like, and a bunch of blue body paint. And I was like, I didn't get the costume, guys. They go, oh no, that's it. They were kind of hoping you would be naked and you would just have blue body paint. And I went to Peter and said, the world doesn't need to see my shortcomings. They'll only be focusing on that. They won't be focusing on the show. So let's just cover it up a little. But yeah, so that's how I ended up wearing just a thong.
So nobody came to you and said, this is something we're considering. They just said, put it on.
We think we're gonna have something. We're gonna have something different there.
Oh my God!
And what I thought they were gonna do was just have me without the shirt. Just wearing the pants and blue paint. And in some discussion they had, they were going to come to me, but I got to the dressing room before they did to tell me. And I just remember
I would say that element of surprise was something that was consistent throughout the process.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
It's something that's occurring to me about the rehearsal process. I'm remembering, the government subsidy for theaters in the UK is substantially higher than in the US. At some points, it can be 50%. For somebody like the RSC or the National, it could easily be that. And at the RSC, it wouldn't be unusual for you to rehearse a play for 5 months because you're doing a lot of shows in rep, but they would just expect to rehearse that long. So I guess they had the luxury of experimenting in rehearsal. We are, in the American system, we are much less subsidized, and thus you're looking for the most efficient route from creative idea to opening night, and that has upsides and downsides. But maybe that's why the rehearsal, plus it was 10 plays, rehearsal period was as long as it was. Let's come back to Bob and Lisa. So this production, okay, so somebody asked, one of the people who asked the documentary asked, how did the RSC and the Denver Center come together? And my understanding is that Mr. Sewell, Don Sewell, who founded the Denver Center, was on the RSC Board of Governors for many years, and that he had heard about this legendary adaptation that John Barton was working on of Tantalus, and thought it would be thrilling to be a part of its origination. And initially there were multiple producing partners involved, and then eventually everybody fell away except for the RSC and the Denver Center. So it was definitely Mr. Sewell's baby. But the piece did go on to the UK. And so Bob and Lisa, I want you to talk a little bit about how did you prepare the physical production? Did the physical production go, or did they rebuild it over there? And how did you prepare it for what transferred?
I'll let you start.
The physical production did go to the UK, including the sand. Peter Hall was very specific about the sand. We mixed that sand. We sampled it out of multiple different venues. Golf course sand is different than play sand, and the quality of dust and the amount of dust that came out of it. So some of that sand was actually coal chinkers, little tiny sharp pieces of coal byproduct that had no dust effect, and it also brought a color to it. I think we shipped 7 tons of sand to the UK, and one of the people that came from the RSC, when we loaded it out, he said, it's an island why are we shipping sand to the but we did. We prepared everything. We built crates for everything. Everything was documented. One of the issues that we had in the scenic department was we created all the fire effects, and I didn't go to the UK, but there were some complications with the fire effects that went to the UK and whether they would allow us to use them or not. And I'm not sure all of the fire effects were used in the UK. We had certainly at that time a little more relaxed
Codes.
control and code for our fire effects. But the whole thing, including the stag on a stick, and miles and miles of red neon, lots of. It was quite a process getting it packaged up.
Wow. And go ahead, Lisa.
I mean, initially there was going to be like a world tour. It was going to go to England and Japan and Greece, and just everybody would want to be a part of this. And like you said, other partners fell away, so we were just planning on the UK tour.
And we always knew that. We knew that we were sending this to other countries. That was the plan.
That's what I would chime in just to say that's why we chose to fabricate some of the things we did the way we did, so that they could survive.
So they last.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's come back to Stephen for a second. So Stephen, did you travel with it?
No, we didn't, because I was a graduate student at the Denver Center at the time, and there was some I can't remember this because I was young. There was some weirdness with equity. I can't remember they were paying us as students, but then we had already surpassed our equity membership candidacy stuff. I can't remember what the logistics were, but I and my 4 other classmates all were replaced by one RSC intern.
No way.
She came to watch our last few weeks of a run or something in Denver and learned all of our parts, and then and then she had some choreographer who was working with her who had to distill everything that the 5 of us did down to one person. Do you remember this, Robert?
Yeah, Trifina Mulford was her name.
Yes. Right.
I remember because she took over Morgan's part as my son in one of the plays. And I remember we picked up another female actress in England to play a Myrmidon. And I'm so terrible that I can't remember her name. But tall enough that they felt comfortable putting her in the Myrmidon costume and being one of the soldiers in that. But yeah, it was so interesting, going to the UK. We were also excited to do it, but I remember what Bob was mentioning before, that in some venues we couldn't use flame, in other venues we could, and it was all a fluid. Which place are you in? What are we going to get to do this time? And of course, fitting that into different theaters and resizing things. Yeah. I remember distinctly going off the front of the stage in Newcastle. After the end, when Priam says, "Take the great horse in," I'm in what I used to call my tilt-a-whirl dress, because it was this large red thing that it was incredible, an incredible piece. And there was but I could barely see. And the lights would go to black, and there'd be someone in the wings with a flashlight in every city to sort of do this, shine the flashlight, so I knew where to go. And I didn't turn enough, or they weren't there. I can't remember what it was. And I saw the light, and I went toward the light, and I stepped off the front of the stage and flipped and landed on my back. I mean, I missed the audience by this much in this giant thing. And I had a hell of a time trying to stand back up, but I did get back up, and I thought, well, I can't climb back up on stage. What I saw was the exit sign light. And so I'm like, okay, take the exit and you'll just sneak out of here. Of course, it's all still in blackout, and stage management's looking for where's Robert. And so I open the door, and light floods into the house. and I'm in the tilt-a-whirl, this giant wide costume, and I'm trying to get out the door, but of course I'm trying to go straight through, and I keep hitting, and finally it occurs to me, now that the entire audience has turned to look at me, I had to turn sideways and sort of hop off and go back up the stage. But that, that's always a thrilling thing when you tour any show. You go to a new venue, you don't know. But yeah, that was a memory I'll always have. And when I got backstage, I thought everyone would be like, "Oh my God, you fell off the stage! Look at you!" No one knew it happened. No one knew it happened. My dresser's like, "Where were you, love?" Like, "Where were you, love? Because you were supposed to have a flashlight." "Oh yeah, I forgot that. Sorry." I'm like, yeah, no big deal. I just.
Oh my gosh, Robert, I want to stay with you for just a second. So the blue body paint, I'm fascinated with that. So was it you decided, like, did you have dressers to help you? Did you paint yourself? How did it occur?
I would paint. Mostly, I'd paint myself to get it on. I did have to have some assistance in the back area because I couldn't quite see everything, but. It was a little less hectic in Denver because the path was pretty clear. But in Denver, I would go to the dressing room and there was a shower, and I would get in the shower. And while I was scrubbing the front of my body, I had someone scrubbing the back of my body to take off the blue makeup because it was a pretty quick change. And I had to come back in just with a wrap around my waist. In England, it had to change in every venue. So what it ended up becoming, instead of a warm shower that had been running for me for a little bit, it was a cold hose in a kiddie pool. And so there would be two women waiting for me. And I can't remember who bought me the hippopotamus sponge, but it went on tour with me too. But they would have the hippopotamus sponge and another one, and then I would get a sponge, and I would jump in there, trying to clean my face and my front, and someone would be cleaning my bum and doing all that, and which leads me, of course, to my almost my favorite story of the tour, which was we had taken 3 weeks off between towns. And I was trying to keep in pretty good shape since I was naked on stage, and I was also covered in blue paint at one point. So I was trying to, exercise and stuff. And then we went away to Paris and Italy for 3 weeks. And I came back and we did the show. And the young woman who was responsible for my bum came up to me in the bar afterwards and was like, "Rob, can I say something to you?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." She goes, "I noticed you ain't been working out as much as before." And I said, "Oh," she goes, "Yeah, because your bum's getting a bit jiggly." I said, "Oh, it is." She goes, "Yeah, your bum's got a bit jiggly." And I said, "Well, thank you for telling me." And she meant it. She meant it with the greatest affection, and she was concerned. She wanted to make sure, I was in good health. But I loved her for that so much. I had such affection for her. But I think that was my favorite thing that happened on the tour. Just that phrase will always stick in my head. Your bum's got a bit jiggly.
That is so mortifying. I want to kind of our last round. I would just love to hear. I was struck as I was watching the documentary. I was struck by the sheer ambition of the thing. Just like I can't think of any other project. Maybe the Grapes of Wrath at Steppenwolf that was, required as much, but even that, it was just so crazy in its ambition, but somehow really, really delicious. And it made me hope that maybe we don't do a 9-play cycle, but there's some point in the Denver Center's future that there's something that really stretches us beyond what we normally think we can achieve. And I just wonder what your takeaways are. You got 20 years distance. What's the one thing that sticks with you looking back on that project? Let's start with Mr. Hughes.
I think, when you talk about the sheer scale of it and the ambition and everything that went into it, it was so huge. And I graduated from the Denver Center shortly after this play closed, and I went to New York and I got an agent and I started my career. And And for the first few years in New York or wherever I was, Tantalus was on my resume. And so it was always a conversation starter. I would be in the room with somebody and they'd look down and they'd go, "Oh, you were in Tantalus. What was that like?" And so it was just, it's really amazing to have been part of something so huge.
I love that. Bob and Lisa, what about you two?
I love just the scale of it. I love that the idea of we're going to do this big play and we're going to give you the resources and it's going to be hard. I mean, we had time off before we started because we knew we weren't going to have any time in the summer to kind of relax and rejuvenate. And then we were just in it, and it was relentless, but it was huge. And while it was crazy, I think that there was a feeling that it was going to be a monumental, good piece of theater. And it was rewarding to get to the other side of it. It was, hell in the trenches, but it was really an awesome experience. And, like, I think Peter said, this is like what theater should be. You have the ideas and you have the right people in the room and you're putting together a story, and it's wonderful.
I love it. Bob?
I think that I recall a meeting of the production department, and Kevin, I'm not sure if you have this same recollection. I don't think Lisa does. But we had a meeting before it all started where Donovan Marley, our artistic director, said to us that it was going to be very difficult, and he did not expect all of us to be there. And he did not expect that we would all make it.
Oh, wow.
But we were going to do it anyway. And the final takeaway was Lisa and I saw it together on a marathon day, and I was so proud and so enjoyed the whole process. And, at times I didn't think I was going to enjoy it. I thought there was no way I would enjoy this. It's been so hard, but I was so proud and enjoyed that whole day immensely. It was just incredible as a marathon, especially.
Oh my God, I love that. Kevin?
I would tag on to that, saying that yes, it was incredibly difficult a lot of the time, but it always felt like we were working on something important, and I loved the epic scale of it, the scope of it, and it was almost operatic. And that really appeals to my sense of storytelling or my aesthetic, and I can't get past that. And Chris, I think I've told you this story before, that a couple years later, I was in a restaurant in Venice in Italy, and ended up because I spoke a little Italian at the time, I ended up assisting this stranger in reading a menu. Small talk ensued. She was from somewhere in the UK, and one thing led to another, and she realized I had mentioned that I was from Denver, and she said, "Did you work on Tantalus?" And it was an incredible feeling. It was like, I did work on Tantalus. Let's talk, and it was incredible. I mean, being a part of something that of that scope and scale and whatnot, and affected so many people in such a vast way on so many different levels, still feels important. And it is a highlight. It's one of the highlights of my career at this point, for sure.
I love it.
Yeah.
How about you, Mr. Petkoff?
Well, Kevin said the word. It is easily the most epic piece of theater I've ever been involved in. Nothing has ever been on size, scale, intensity, that experience. And I said before, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. But on balance, looking back, I don't think much about stuff that I think, oh, I don't enjoy this, or I think so much more of how it challenged me as an actor more than anything I had done up to that point, and more than most things I've done since. The memories, being able to tell a story on that scale, and to talk to audience members, especially the audience members who saw it in one day. You came at 10 in the morning, you watched for 3-ish hours, then you all went and had a lunch together and you talked about the play. Then they came back and watched 3 more hours and went and had dinner together and talked about what they'd seen. And then they went and finished the play. And so many of them said that people talked to me said, it's like I got to the end of one of my favorite novels and I didn't want it to end. And they said, I never thought that I would say that after sitting for 10 hours, 10 plus hours in a theater, but they said, I wanted it to keep going, just like we do when we read a great book. And I think that hit me more than any other comment. And it was mentioned to me a couple of times by different people. And that just felt fantastic to hear. And it was that. It was out of chaos came art. And that is so often the case.
I love that so much. And, we had our very first retreat with the board of directors, I guess the first May that I was here. And at one point, I don't know if it was me or the facilitator asked, what was your favorite or most memorable production in all of your time at the Denver Center? And some of them have literally seen every production in 42 years. And I would say at least half. It was Tantalus. And what I love, I hate that I didn't get to see it, but what I really love is that this organization and so many of the people who have been with us for so many years made something like that possible. That's just an extraordinary feat. And it's one of the reasons that we wanted to just take another look at it and remind ourselves of what's possible at this organization and why the art form matters. I appreciate every one of you for sharing your great, oh my God, amazing stories. Robert, the stagehand who came up to you in the UK, that will definitely stay with me. That was brilliant. And thanks so much to all of you for tuning in, and stay healthy. And we look forward to gathering with you as soon as we've all been vaccinated. Have a good one.